7, do you get much bike riding in the winter? Do you get to ride?
Time is 7:07. We'll call the meeting to order here tonight. Planning Commission meeting on February the 17th, 2021. I'd like to recognize and welcome Ted Mickelson, who has been recently appointed to the Planning Commission, and this is his first night here. This is Lori's second time, right? Being
I know everything now.
here. Good, you can educate us. I'd like to start and ask Lori if she would to lead us in the pledge, and Ted offer invocation.
To repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me, I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful that we could gather here this evening as the Planning Commission of Woodland Hills, and for this opportunity we have to meet and to assist with the city responsibilities. We're grateful for this land that we live in and for our freedoms that we enjoy. And we pray that thou will bless the leaders of both the city and of this land, that thy hand might be felt in their decision-making and guidance through their leadership. We pray that thou will be with us tonight, that we might be able to discuss the items need to be discussed in the spirit in which we can be cooperative and be able to accomplish those things which we need to accomplish tonight. And we will be open to the process. And we pray for these things in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Ted. First item on the agenda is approval of the December and January minutes. Inadvertently left off the December minutes in our January meeting, so they didn't get approved. So that's the reason I've got both of them listed tonight. They've been sent out, and I don't think I made it, or had any requests for any corrections to them. December's kind of far away, so I'm not quite sure. But if there were suggestions, they were done. But anyway, if there's no questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve both the December and January Planning Commission meetings.
I still move.
Okay, first motion, approved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second from Larry. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you. Item number 2 is review and consider for approval a new criteria for public facility zone. Ted, you haven't been involved with this process. Let me give a little bit of background on it. We've had a couple of public hearings where we took comment from the public, and following that, I believe it was in our December meeting, we had discussion about it in our Planning Commission meeting, and came up with a recommendation to the City Council to consider it the mitigation area, public facilities zone with a mitigation and no trespassing overlay. The comments we got from the public were, to me, pretty emphatic that they didn't want a trailhead there. They didn't want any kind of recreation facility or anything that would bring additional people to the area. They wanted the peace and tranquility that they moved here to Woodland Hills for. So we felt that that was the best way to address it. That was presented to the City Council, and there were some reservations expressed that maybe we didn't go far enough, or other things that we ought to consider. So the city council appointed John Wallace to kind of be a committee chair for the group of people up there in the area where the mitigation work was done, to get a further opinion and view from them kind of relative to our recommendation, as well as to the things that they felt might enhance what we recommended or change it, however, whatever the citizens were interested in doing. So John has met with the group and had communication with them on email several times. And I've worked with him a little bit and trying to give a little bit of guidance and maybe suggestion here or there as to further changes that might be made to the zone. The way it can be crafted is that it would be a public facilities zone with a mitigation and no trespassing overlay with the following criteria type thing. So there would be things added to that. Be this kind of the same way with, we have a zone for a residential, single family on 1 acre, and then all the things that go along with that, the setbacks and the criteria for building a home there. So this would be added criteria that would be included in that particular physical facility zone, having to do with unique to the mitigation and no trespassing. So with those thoughts in mind, what one suggestion has been, and I think I sent this to you all. Let me read it here. One thing they were pretty adamant about is they didn't want the city to build any structures, any storage structures or anything that would, where the city would end up putting equipment up there and things like that. They didn't want that. So it starts out saying no structures will be built on the property and only city approved access is allowed to maintain, improve, and beautify the mitigation area, and to install and maintain any fencing done to protect the property to ensure it complies with any mitigation agreements. Also, a 15-foot wide soft surface walking path, not subject to the no trespassing or city approval to use, may be constructed along Grizzly Lane outside of any fence line that encloses the mitigation area, as long as it does not interfere with the intended purpose of the mitigation. Now that's one draft, and there was a suggestion in Jody looking at this that if we were to include a walking path, it might be best to not name Grizzly Lane, because that restricts it to only that particular area. If there are other properties in the city that potentially in the future would fall under mitigation work, and there was interest in a path, then this is exclusive to Grizzly Lane. It's not to other parts of the city. So just something to consider as we further talk about it here.
So that, would that then be on the city easement, or would it be on the city property?
It would be on the city property. The city has entire control of that piece of property. So there'd be no easement. It would just be further description of what would be allowed on that piece of property.
But I thought all roads had a certain.
This is on the property itself.
Okay.
So it's not off the property or on the road. It's on the mitigation property itself.
So question I would have there, maybe for Larry's point, is when you have a road that is, say, for example, Grizzly Lane itself. That road is, I don't know the width of the actual road. 25, 30 feet, something like that.
Probably 26 maybe.
26. The actual right of way on Grizzly is 58 feet. So you've got 26 feet from center lane going either way. So then these paths would actually be within the road right of way, right?
I don't know.
So this path would be up off of the,
So we go outside of the right of way. So then it would have to be at least 13 feet off the road. You have to go
It would be pretty much adjacent to the road over to where the mitigation starts. So the discussion was the fence line, the fence would run close to the mitigation work, but distant from Grizzly Lane. So this pathway would not be included within the fence work.
right, but it would be part of the road right away, which is city right away. They could put it.
Yeah,
We just have to verify that that's often paths are put within road right ways. All the time. So it's not something I do, but it would actually be in the road right away, not on the. So typically in these things, at least the experience I've had is the fence goes on the property line. I'm guessing where we look at the fence, because
correct. If without the pathway, the fence would be cover the whole property.
yeah, it goes along, because these road right of ways typically are set for a couple of reasons. I want to see, so if the car runs off the road, it's got enough room before it hits a fence or some other structure. So they've got some distance between the edge of the pavement and a fence or whatever. So usually the fences are put at the edge of the right of way line or right of way line and the property line above, which is usually some distance beyond the road itself. In this case, I think it's about 13 feet. So then the path would go right on the road side of the fence. Yes. So it'd be a road right, which can be done. Just kind of a clarification as we consider this, the fence should probably be on the right of line. To give us that, they call it clear distance or something like that. Jeremy probably is better than I do.
Yeah.
So the walking path just goes along the road, doesn't go up onto any of the other. property?
Correct, it's just on those two pieces of property right there. So, and also, they wanted to include, like, that it be a split rail fence, so that no chain link fence or something like that would go up there. That would maybe take away from the beauty of the area and whatnot, if the chain link fence. So they want to include the split rail fence in that definition, so that's what the city would put there. Now, in our code, the city can put up chain link fence if it wants to, surrounding city property. In fact, it's done that over at the well and the storage tanks and so forth. So, but the group doesn't want chain link fence, and I can understand that. So, those are kind of
There
the
several types of split rail fences too. You have some that have fence posts with holes that go through them. You also have some that are like a tripod that have a rail on top and then one or two rails coming down. I mean,
yeah.
and I think either of those are aesthetically pleasing and appropriate for the area.
And the group wasn't specific. I think what we see here in town more is the poles that go through the fence posts, that sort of thing. So I suspect that's probably what they had in mind, put up there, but we can check with.
Well, I'm happy with the.
With John. So, the city council is looking for added input from us regarding the suggestion that this group has made. So the one issue kind of in my mind remains is this walking path. Is that something that's I have some reservations about it myself. It starts from nowhere and goes to nowhere. It's just there within those pieces of property. I'm not sure the real value of it. One comment was made by the group that potentially there would be a grant money, state grant money that might be available for this walking path. Again, it would go towards maybe the beautification of the area up there that the city might have access to. For walking path type thing. So it wouldn't pertain to the mitigation or anything like that. It would be focused specifically on this walking path. So
One challenge maybe though is some people might be tempted to park there for whatever reason.
on the side of the road and get out, and, yeah. And you've got true. And if the fence isn't there, then you've got kids trafficking up and down potentially. that area as well, which in my view, the residents didn't want that sort of thing. So,
I think the fence would be priority before the walking path myself.
again, what we're gonna be making the city council is a recommendation. It doesn't have to be unanimous either. I mean, we've pretty much already made a recommendation, but I think there's value in adding to that with some of these things that have been brought up. City council will decide what they're going to do. They'll take our recommendation in consideration, but they may choose something different.
And in fact, we may want to also have no parking signs reinforced or put up there, just
Could be along Grizzly there particularly.
reinforce that. I mean, there's not supposed to be parking on streets anyway. So,
Right.
So does this mitigation overlay applies to the mitigation areas, but specific to those two properties?
Well,
Correct, not the
yeah,
parking.
there are 4 lots.
4 lots, right?
Yes.
4 lots.
But the fence is unique to the property along Grizzly Lane, from what I understand.
At this fence and for the trail.
I don't know if that's true.
Let's turn to
Is it-
John. John, have I correctly stated the views that that you want us to consider?
There was some trail discussion going down along the channel district park.
Yeah, I mean, you read one of the quotes there, Wayne, and there's been enough of them going back and forth. It's hard to. I'm just looking at the one here. Because you basically read this, no structures will be built on property and only city approved access is allowed to maintain, improve, repair, mitigation areas, install and maintain split rail fence. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, our main thing is just limiting access and allowing some fencing and whatever beautification can be done down the road, so.
Was there discussion of a split rail fence on the property to the east on those 2 lots up there?
All 4 lots have our blessing of a split rail fence, should the city decide to go that route at some point, yes.
Okay. So we don't want to restrict it to Grizzly Lane then?
No, that could apply to all 4 lots, the split rail fence. The only thing that would be different would be that path. Other than that, the rest of the verbiage would apply to all 4 lots, so.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Okay. So any other thoughts?
So are we talking just, I'm sorry, I was trying to find a quote, and I had it a second ago. Does it talk about just about the path going along Grizzly?
Yes,
As part of the mitigation overlay zone?
yes.
So the mitigation overlay zone is only going to apply to those 4 properties, but not the mitigation overlay.
It's,
Because I know there was some discussion, and John reminded me, wasn't there some discussion about a trail going down along that channel that goes through the park to tie into the trail at the bottom of the park?
So we're calling upper, middle, and lower mitigation just to differentiate the 3 projects, the lower one being the park. Does that make sense? So, yeah, middle and upper, we don't want anything connecting to anything. That lower obviously is within the park, and I think there's some great options there. I know Greg's exploring some things there for grants as far as accessing to the sides of that channel and working that in, and you know, it's already part of the city there anyway. It's just mainly that middle and upper that we'd be concerned about, the limiting the public access. The park area, go for it. So.
This mitigation overlay zone wouldn't apply to the park area.
Correct.
Since it's already city owned.
Okay, and this isn't saying that there will be a walking path, but it's just that there may be.
yes.
Correct.
If the city doesn't have money and if the grant doesn't come through, then it won't be immediate, you know, or maybe a couple of years from now or whatever, but at least the provision would be in place if we agree to that at some point in time, there can be a walking path put along.
that Wayne?
Yes,
Yeah, the split rail fence, the beautification, revegetation, all of that is gonna be subject to funding at whatever future point. So none of this is happening currently, and I couldn't tell you when any of it might. It's all just gonna be based on fund availability and whatever those sources may be. So it could be tied on any of those, so.
okay, yeah, we understand that.
And when it actually talked, I think I should say, wait, but in the city council at one point, it talks about the spirit rail fence and getting donations in order to build a split rail fence and putting a little placard on it saying so-and-so donated this section of the fence and so on.
And I think that's still on that's a possibility of doing that, taking that approach. Do it with private donations.
And I guess the only one other comment I had about that quote, maybe this is one John can help us with, but it said in that first sentence, I don't remember the exact verbiage, it's trying to find it, said maintain, beautify, and improve.
Yes, maintain, improve, and beautify.
Yeah, the improve is a word, I guess, and I'm wondering what was the thought behind improve, and does that open the door to putting a playground yard in there? That's an improvement.
No, because it would
They're
say,
talking about trees.
And that's, I think that's,
yeah,
I'm wondering if.
planting, vegetation, that would be the improvements that would be made to that mitigation area, as long as it did not interfere with the mitigation.
That's what I'm wondering, is if that improves just a little
Too broad.
too broad. Yeah, because it's 10 years down the road, someone says improve, oh, we can improve this area, so let's go in and change stuff, or put a playground, or make it a park, or something like that. They're not building a structure, building.
So you think maintain and beautify would be sufficient?
Maintain, so a lot of times when we do this, it's maintain, operate, beautify, because that will operate it, maintain it. When we write easements, a lot of times for things like these in cities, where they're putting on other people's property. A lot of times we'll maintain, operate, beautify, access, things like that, city. Now, if the city has plans down the road to do something like that, but I would be, so that the original operation and intent of the basin is not changed.
Correct, and the citizens there are emphatic about that sort of thing, so, and that's fine.
Yeah, I would just be, that was the only other word that comes
Okay.
in there, because improved, could be leave that wide open for.
Yeah,
Quick question. As far as I know, our ad hoc committee, we have not seen a kind of a final draft of what's going to the city. Can we see that before it goes to the city council?
sure, the city council will be meeting on Tuesday, but I can read it to you pretty much tonight. I mean, we haven't further discussed if we're going to do this, but I guess generally what would be proposed is this. It would say no structures would be built on the property and only city-approved access is allowed to maintain, operate, and beautify the mitigation area and to install and maintain a split rail fence done to protect the property to ensure compliance with any mitigation agreements. And the second part of that, also, a 15-foot wide soft surface walking path, not subject to no trespassing or city approval to use, may be constructed outside of any fence line that encloses a mitigation area, as long as it does not interfere with the intended purpose of the mitigation work.
Okay.
And as part of your storage.
And then the follow-up. The follow-up question then is on the,
What do you do overnight? If you've got mitigation work that you need to do,
I don't see that as equipment storage. I see that as equipment use.
we're coming back next week to finish the,
Well,
Is that covered under only city approved access is allowed to maintain and operate?
probably.
Is it? Is it?
I, yeah, I'm fine with that,
City access.
yeah. If everybody else would be. So your thoughts are,
I think what you read is fine.
it's fine?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you put split rail fencing and then they have a lot of people climbing over it, that at some time you need to put in a chain link. We won't do it no matter what. Okay, even if everybody's in there all the
They
time.
were pretty emphatic about
That's right.
that.
Or those wrought irons with the spike.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. Yeah. Okay, well, let's kind of make it official here with, let's take a motion on these.
Two streets.
There you go.
Electric. It's in the shop.
Yeah.
Transformer.
Up around the Capitol.
Electric split rail.
So as I read that, I'd take a motion if you're good with adding this criteria to the public facility mitigation, no trespassing overlay with this criteria.
I so moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay. We'll go back to city council with that changed. John, thanks for all the work that you did. You and Greg too, I know others. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate your patience on this, so.
You bet. Next, we want to have a discussion of our building height ordinance. What I'd like to do is in March, have a public hearing on it. So I wanted to kind of get everybody's thoughts tonight and make sure we're maybe of one mind on it, and then have a public hearing in March, and then a further recommendation to city council on it. Those, again, let me give some background to particularly with Laurie and Ted, as to why I'm suggesting that we need to revisit this and change it. This is our current building height definition. How it's defined. A vertical distance to a maximum of 35 feet from the natural lowest point to the highest point of the coping of a flat roof, or the deck line of a mansard roof, or the mean height level between eaves and ridge for gable, hip, and gambrel roofs. Now, those are all different kinds of roofs, so it depends on the kind of roof as to where that highest point is measured from. For example, and that's pretty, I mean, it's pretty specific. The mean height level between eaves and ridge of a gable, hip, or gambrel roof is the distance between the ridge line and the eave, halfway between it. That's the mean. So it's not the top of it. That's how that particular roof is measured. If it's a deck line roof, then it's measured to similar to a flat roof, the height of that. And a mansard roof, I'm trying to, you know the story what you're,
They come on this.
yeah, it's like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Flat on top, but on the side. So.
That would be great. Line there before.
Yeah. So here's the problem with it. The vertical distance to a maximum of 35 feet from the lowest point. Where's the lowest point? It doesn't say where it is. There's an assumption that it would be somewhere around the house, on a footprint, or on the perimeter, but it doesn't say. And then to the highest point of those roofs. Again, it doesn't say that that highest point needs to be immediately above the lowest point. So we've got a lot of roof lines in the city that they may have 3 or 4 different roof lines. So one could look at that and say, well, I'll take it to the lowest roof line, because it doesn't say not to. So there's where the ambiguity comes with our existing ordinance. Now, I know probably what was intended when that was done, but there's a problem with the state. The state says that if any of our ordinances if there's ambiguity in any of them, then they're to be interpreted in favor of the applicant. So if the applicant says, your ordinance doesn't specify this, so I'm interpreting it this way. And the state code says, this is 10-9A-306. It says a land use authority shall apply the plain language of land use regulations. If a land use regulation does not plainly restrict a land use application, the land use authority, which is us, shall interpret and apply the land use regulation to favor the land use application. Any land use decision of a land use authority is an administrative act, even if the land use authority is a legislative body. So it makes a distinction between us and the state council. So that's the problem that we run into. And there is another type of home that Summit Creek is looking to do some proposals with their community over there that our current ordinance would really be out of whack with it. A couple of months ago, we asked Jeremy Searle to come up with a number of city ordinances, but in particular Park City's ordinance. And that's what Summit Creek is looking at maybe adopting for some of their homes over there. They have they have CC&Rs that govern a lot of what they do. But our city code that governs the CC&Rs, they won't do anything outside of our city code to be more restrictive. So the Park City ordinance, which I said to everybody, and let me read it here. It says, the height of the building is measured from any or all points on the structure to the natural grade, which is a grade prior to any construction below that point. In order for a house in a residential zone to meet the height limit, no point on the structure may be higher than 33 feet in Park City above natural grade. So flat roofs must be no more than 28 feet above natural grade. Height limits vary by zone, but the method for measuring height is consistent. Then it says, when determining a building's height, staff calculates the elevation of the highest ridges and peaks, including eaves. These points are then located on the site plan, and the elevation of the natural grade immediately below that point is subtracted from the elevation of the point on the ridge, thus indicating the height above natural grade. So they've drawn a picture, and I think I sent this to everybody. So if it's on an incline, for example, any place along that structure, the highest point, immediately below that can't be more than the approved building height. Park City has done this to put homes, if people wanted to, up a slope. Thank you. And any place along that slope, whatever the highest point is at that structure, right below it can't be, the natural grade can't be more than whatever the building height is determined. Now,
Park City has a lot of those structures.
they do. They got narrow lots that run up the slope and that kind of house would be accommodated here with this definition. And I think it would accommodate our own definition as well. We've been concerned a little bit with the Robert Nelson's subdivision. Because his is all flat down there. But this same thing would apply in his building down there as well, the homes being built down there. As I've looked and thought about this, I would say to keep our height the same, 35 feet. Park Cities is limited to 33 feet. We continue to keep ours at 35 feet. Do away with the stories. Also, it creates issues all the time with the number of stories. The way we leave the stories as they're defined in our code, but we wouldn't use that in our definition right now. And that's another problem with our definition, interestingly enough. It says 2 stories and 35 feet, 2 stories or 35 feet. So somebody could build a 2-story home that's 45 feet. Because they're 2 stories. So I think it would behoove us to eliminate the story criteria for our building height, and just keep it to feet.
But, I mean, I don't read it that way. When it says 2 stories or 35 feet,
It's or.
you know, okay, I see what you're saying. All we have to do is change order to and.
If they said 2 stories.
Yeah,
about no
And
more,
35 feet.
or say about no more.
It just,
I agree, the stories
the
just,
stories
it
is.
shouldn't matter if you said the height.
It's already covered elsewhere. It is. Yeah. And that does away with the walkout basement issues and everything else that we've kind of been confronted with a little bit too, that they're just, it's a simple foot. That's, the rest is not part of, we would take the story issue out of the criteria. So anyway, I want to have a discussion about it. What you all think about it and see if we're where we all stand and our views and thoughts. And I don't know, like, I don't know that there'd be any big change with construction in the city, with the way it's been going, what it's been doing, if we change this definition. But it would be more clear. We've been fortunate, I think, that we haven't had too many people push back. We've been respectful of what we have, but somebody and several can come along, I think, make an issue over our current way it's currently written, and I think the city would have to go along with, as long as they were within the confines of that definition, we would have to accept that. So.
I would agree with your recommendation, and I like the idea of just limiting it just based on height, regardless of stories, and then also defining where these points are measured, because that is really confusing. You define where they're measured, I think that leaves a little
That
question.
takes care, yeah.
And I, you know, I like what Ted said, because as we talked about, if you have a roof line that you've got several roof lines that are different levels, which we've got them all over Woodland Hills. That definition said, okay, from this point, it's no more than 35 feet. From this point, it's no more than 35 feet. From this point, it's no more than 35 feet. Because all of those, and that drawing that we have from Park City basically set up a parallelogram that kind of tied all those together to say, okay, this is all within code.
Yeah. This is the distance, and it, you know, up and down, and wherever it's, the point is directly below that point. Now, we're looking at 35 feet. Right now, we're cutting some roof lines we're using a mean, you know, to measure that, that would go away. It would be the ridge. You know, whatever the highest point is directly below that, the 35 feet.
I think that cleans it up a lot. It's a lot simpler and clearer definition. I don't. And those ridge and different types of roofs give different measurements. I think it's just all.
Yeah.
I like the idea of just a straight 35 feet, the actual point.
Park City so really had a different height limit for a flat roof, right?
No?
28, I think.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, yes. They're 28 feet, yeah, for flat roof.
5 feet.
Yeah.
5 feet.
But we're possibly lowering that
We technically are for a hip, for
for top.
a, is it hip roof?
Yes, for gable, yeah.
Gable or,
Because we really have cut off that midpoint, and we've lost that off.
Yeah.
And so 35 feet now has to be from the top of the ridge.
Yeah.
Down to the natural point. So we really shortened.
Some could be shorter a little bit.
But not 35 feet for a flat roof though.
I guess we,
Park City.
well, what do you think? My thoughts are to leave it.
Yeah, why do they have the difference?
Leave it the way Park Cities is.
No, leave 35 feet. Don't make it 28 feet or.
Well, don't we
Well,
require pitch on the roof anyway?
I mean, you talked about a 10-foot interior ceiling.
Because that would really
You
go.
can have 3 stories within 35 feet easy on a flat roof.
Which.
But our flat roofs allowed. We will do those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope so.
yeah.
Might be trouble.
And
They are
Summit
allowed.
Creek has them too. We don't see them too many.
we've got them up here too. There's one right in my backyard.
you know, that new
You
house.
go right now.
It's got all flat roofs.
How does that?
But it still doesn't, I mean, it still doesn't protrude above,
Right.
you know, the ridge roof. It's still gonna be topped out at a ridge roof.
Would it matter if a flat roof has the same elevation?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I know Park Cities has got a difference, I don't know why, but I don't know why it would matter.
You raised it. Any thoughts?
Well, I guess my concern is that we really are trying to open it up for 2 stories
Is it not?
above
okay?
natural grades.
Just as long as they stay the height, isn't that okay? As long as they stay the height requirements. But I don't know.
I'm just thinking ahead.
Yeah.
When we have public meeting, I will bet you that we will hear screams about you're going to allow 3-story houses.
And let's talk, is there something wrong with it?
I don't know that there is.
There's
Yeah,
35.
yeah,
As long as it's not more than 35 feet.
As long as it's not more than 35 feet, I don't know that I have an issue. The whole idea is to just not block the ridge line here.
Right, everybody. Yeah.
For everyone, so as long as you limit the height. My guess is, and I don't know, maybe one of the reasons why they drop flat roofs lower is because
Spreads out to the edges and that's more limitation.
yeah, and if you get snow stacking on it, and you just I get 3 feet of snow there sometimes.
You got right now.
What's the slope of your roof?
Which section? They vary.
The least slope.
Well, we've got flat roof, which is.
You've got a flat roof.
Yeah, I've got a flat roof. And the ones like 212 pitch or 312, one's 612.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem. I mean, you know, put metal roof, put metal on it. Snow will be off mine quicker than some of these really cheap roofs. You don't have.
Did you have to have it built stronger to hold more weight?
If you're flat, yeah, you have to be, we had to do I think it was for.
That's not a snow load.
And
Yeah, I can't remember.
Trusses.
And I think the snow load here is like 70 pounds per square foot. So they're required. I think I actually did 80 just to be safe.
You probably had to put additional trusses in though to support that.
So, yes, and they're 2x12s, like a regular 2x4 or 2x6, or whatever, but I have 2x12s plus some big ones. So, yeah, they designed for it.
Okay. So I think we're good to go forward with that. Then, as a recommendation, and take public comment and see.
So at this point, it's a recommendation for the March meeting,
Yes,
not really, not going to city council yet.
no,
This is just for the public hearing.
public hearing.
Yeah.
Public hearing, have more to take comment.
I think it would be nice to leave it, the way you have it, and maybe if people in the city are opposed to the flat roofs being the same height, then
Yeah, we'll see what
we can talk about
what is
it.
said and whatnot there. Now there's, see, with their maximum of 33, then the flat roof is 28, so it's 5 foot less
Yeah.
than the regular roof line.
So
So
if we follow their pattern,
it would be 30.
35 and 30.
For a flat roof. So, but that's a good point. See what the public comment is
Yeah.
and what they say about it. So, okay, we'll plan on that when we watch. Item 4, review and recommendation to city council on Title 12 and the SWIP contractor. There was a contract, and I think I sent everybody a copy of it that was drafted. Paul MacArthur got it. Then we made some modifications to it. And the SWIP contractor that we've talked to, he's fine with it. Doesn't have any objection to it.
Okay, good.
He's okay with it. So that part is resolved. This,
We really didn't get any public comment to speak of.
we did
For section
12,
right?
and I think that people didn't know enough to comment and whatnot, but I think I sent out a final draft to you all. The city council is looking for a recommendation from us to go ahead and adopt that. I've looked through it, LEI's looked through it a couple of times.
Well, the other aspect is that cities that have overflow gutters and things like that, that take a lot of wastewater and put down their sewer system to say, has a lot more influence and impact than it does here in Woodward Hills, where we don't have that wastewater going into the sewer system. And so I don't know that it would affect more than just a few of the residents that have that.
Well, I think it's more for surface level.
It is.
Yeah,
And Summer Creek has provisions, they've got some lost the words tonight, some collection pools and so forth, a few where they take runoff and let it seep into
retention ponds.
retention pond things.
There are a few here. I mean, we've got one.
Yeah,
over
yeah, city, right.
Generally, the intent for the SWIP is to just, the idea behind it is just, for the most part, to keep pollutants and sediments, et cetera, from going in and impairing the natural waters.
Sure.
This is during
So,
construction.
During construction, if you got piles of dirt, they don't want all the sediment washing off, or getting the storm drains or going down roads, and they, all of them making their way to the river, lake, or whatever.
So
And then you
what,
have more trouble treating it with.
once the home is finished and we don't need to worry about that anymore, they can clear out their pile of dirt or whatever it's holding the water back, or?
Yes, the water's still supposed to be retained on their property with grading and so forth. The water that falls on their property.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's designed though to come out into the street. The runoff is, and that's acceptable after construction. So, but at that point in time, the primary hazard is supposed to be mitigated so that during these construction periods, you don't have those kinds of issues that are going to contaminate the underground water.
Now, what are the requirements for this on a perfectly flat lot?
There is no such thing.
No.
There wasn't a hill.
Okay, but down the lower part, there could be.
It's the same requirement as.
So they still need to construct something to hold water even if the lot's.
If there's a problem.
So, and you might SWIP or temporary measures for the most part.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you are excavating a house and have a pile of dirt, that's still that's right. Once you've got rid of that dirt, lots graded and stuff, so that's graded.
Okay.
And so regardless of what slope of the lot is, you still have the same requirements.
And why?
The city doesn't do that. That's on the contract
Contractor does
to put in place a plan to retain that water.
And why are some of these retention ponds left? And then others, they clear away?
So they're kind of for a different purpose. So a SWIP is just a temporary measure to stop the transport of sediments during construction.
Okay.
If you see these retention basins in cities and stuff like that, they're usually a design facility by a developer. Like when you get in a city, they have a storm drain system.
Yeah.
Well, it's maybe even more than.
No, go ahead.
But when you say like you take a field, right? Only 20% of the water runs off the field and goes downstream. When you come in and plop a bunch of houses and streets and everything, development on that, now 80% of the water can leave that. So now you've increased all the downstream water load and it's impacting someone downstream. So what these basins do is they act like shock absorbers. So basically they're collecting all the water from development and they put it in this pond, and this pond has a little smaller release on it so that the water comes in at 80% and it builds up in the pond and it's only releasing a historical rate. And I'm making these percentages up, but that's generally good. So it's releasing at a slow rate. And that's what those ponds do in developments. That's kind of different than what we're looking at
So
here.
maybe if the developer is putting in a whole subdivision, they would need to put one of those ponds at permanent.
Correct, if they're doing a
But
whole,
if you're just doing one house, you just put something temporary.
yeah. So
The
that's a
idea
different
is to get,
program.
let clean water go back into the earth. So not contaminated and not, gasoline or silt, all that kind of stuff that contaminate the water. So after the construction's done, there's much less of that would be going on. So the retention ponds then allow partial release over time, that water to go back down into the ground and become part of the water table.
Now, SWIP permits are required during construction. There, it's a permit. You have to stands for stormwater prevention pollution
Plan.
And these are, you actually have to apply for a permit with the state.
Yeah.
To get these. And the contractor has to keep that permit on his site during construction. But it's a temporary measure. In theory, these basins you're talking about have already accounted for that extra runoff that house is going to create once it's done. That's to attenuate stormwater. The SWIP is to attenuate the transports of pollutants during construction. So once construction is done, they can then get a NOT, which is a notice of termination, to cancel their permit once they're done construction.
And the contractor, he's required to do a weekly inspection and make sure that the plan is in place and working and any spills or things like that are immediately addressed. So the city inspector follows up to make sure that those inspections are happening on a weekly basis by the contractor. So the city inspector is kind of an oversight to make sure that the contractor is doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay.
Okay, good. It is a little.
So we're going to recommend that the council.
So the recommendation would be that we accept Title 12, that the city adopt that as the stormwater protection prevention plan.
Stormwater prevention.
Yeah.
Stormwater pollution prevention.
Yeah. That the city adopt that and that we also approve the hiring of the contractor to for the city to monitor. So,
I so move.
okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
Okay,
Just to note that, this is something that has to happen, right, or the city could be.
yeah, we have to have
That's the
this
issue.
a plan.
The state is clamping down on cities.
I know several cities who've already been audited and that needs some findings.
Well, we're trying to stop that from happening.
Preclude that. So, okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda is private roads and gates in the city. Some of you were able to participate in the meeting that we had with the city council, planning commission, and representatives from Summit Creek. It wasn't focused on that, but they wanted to kind of get an idea of where the city would come from, we were looking to propose a new preliminary plat, some changes and so forth, and kind of the next phase of development. Most of the time, was everybody able to, did you?
I was out of town.
Okay. You were on, weren't you, Larry, and seven, so. It ended up talking a lot about this because Summit Creek is interested in, I think they're proposing, if I recall right, around 9 gates that would be on private roads. Most of those would go into cul-de-sac areas where the gate would control then the several lots in the cul-de-sac. The city has an ordinance that doesn't allow private roads at this point in time, although the city has approved 2 private roads for Summit Creek.
Which was based on a lack of knowledge by the people that approved it.
Well, maybe.
So what paperwork or what is authorizing them to have private roads? How did the city approve it?
Well,
And
I was on the city council when we did that 2.5 years ago. I was not cognizant of the fact that our ordinance says there are no private roads. There are no semi-private roads. There are public roads and there are private driveways in the story. But not realizing that at that time, the city council did approve a private gate that was along Summit Creek Drive that went into a cul-de-sac with 3 homes. And there have been several others, probably 6 years ago, when they began developing, maybe 7. The mayor at that time apparently made an agreement.
That's the one.
Right.
There was a lot of discussion between Summit Creek and Mayor Lawrenson
Yes.
about private roads and private gates. And then Mayor Lawrenson obviously passed away. And so some of those discussions were not, they were left without documentation. Although Summit Creek did provide a preliminary plat that showed the number of private roads and gates that they were wanting to install. And that preliminary plat was approved. When it came time to a final plat, and that's where some of these issues started to raise. It goes back also to the gate on Summit Creek Road, which is a public gate. And the city, the city ordinance says there's no gating on public roads. So for a long time, Summit Creek during the winter would leave that open for snow plowing purposes, but in the spring and summer would close that. Those gates, if you've ever gone through them, would open as you pulled up to them. They would open automatically. So most of the time, there are a few problems they had, but they were designed to open when you pulled up to them. So Summit Creek now wants to move forward with kind of a new phase in their development and critical to them in their views are private gates, private roads and gates. It's a big selling point for their clientele that are looking at lots over there. It gives privacy to them.
Gated community concept.
Yeah, the people who are looking to buy lots like that, most of them do. And Summit Creek wants to accommodate that to the degree they can, and trying to work with the city on this. The zone that they're in, the R119 zone, with it's called the Mountain Villa overlay, allows them to put gates there for aesthetic purposes only. That's specifically written into the ordinance, that they can't be closed. So the city needs to decide what they're going to do by way of allowing gates. If they want to allow them, then the ordinance needs to be changed to allow that, so that we're not constantly doing things against the ordinance. That's not right. So that's what a lot of the discussion was, for your benefit, too, on that Zoom meeting that we had with Summit Creek. So I don't know that there's ever been a.
We can't really do anything at this point unless the ordinance is changed.
That's my view. We can't approve going against an ordinance. Obviously, the city council can, because they've done that. But
They could
they could.
recommend that the ordinance be changed.
Yes, and I think that's the right thing to do if the city council wants to allow private streets and gates across those. I don't know, to be truthful with you, where the city council stands on that. I think there's going to be some for it and some against it. You were back then when they took a vote, Larry. I don't know that it was unanimous. Do you remember?
I think it was 4-1, 4-1
Against.
Was
I
that
don't-
the gates on the private roads or the gates on?
No, private.
private cul-de-sac. That was the only one. we voted on.
Yeah.
But we have had this discussion now, since I moved into the city 6 years ago. I've been involved with those discussions with Summit Creek regularly. And we've had literally dozens of meetings with them. We've looked at the historical record. And my personal feeling again is if we have an ordinance that says no private or semi-private roads, there's no way that I would feel comfortable in allowing those to be in the city. At the same time, one of my children and his family lived in a gated community and again, private road, private gate, and felt very safe. That's what they wanted to do, and I can understand that. So if in fact they change the ordinance, I would not be opposed to having it. But there's no way that I could ever accept the gates on the Summit Road. I mean, just even visual effect, they would need to be another 10 feet wide for me to, because it is a public road, it's not a private road.
Yeah. I did I don't know, a year, maybe 2 years ago, a lot of phone calls to cities around about gating roads in the city. And I didn't find one city that allowed that on public roads.
So could Woodland Hills sell the road to Summit Creek Development so that it's a private road?
They could, but there's so much water under the bridge with that I don't think that will happen.
This is not access road to the city.
It was built as a exit from the city for emergencies and so forth, so I don't think the city would want to give that up. And that creates problems with the infrastructure, with the utilities, in-ground utilities, the pipes, everything else that's over there. So I don't see that as an option that the city would pursue.
So Larry, you're kind of recommending that the two gates on that public road be removed?
or permanently open.
That's what, the zone that they're in allows that, allows gates, but welded open. That's what it says, so that they're for aesthetic purposes. Those, even though there's a bit of a narrowing down there, but there could be an advantage with that too, with slowing people down as they come through there, whatnot. That's a big problem that Summit Creek's having over there with speeders on Summit Creek Road. And things, they're trying to think of ways to help lessen the speeding over there.
You know, and I noticed after the meeting, the open meeting we had with Summit Creek, I had asked a question about those raised portions. And I did notice when I zoomed in that they are there. They are on their plan for those raised speed bumps.
The intersections.
It is on their plan.
There was a nightmare for snowplow.
It's not nighttime. It's
They raise up and then they're flat. They're really large.
So it's not one that, you know, you're gonna
So you
damage
can
something.
plow
wall or
it
two
easily.
times.
Yeah. Flat, yeah.
And at one point, they were really at intersections. So the whole intersection was raised and then it went off. But I don't think that that last picture really showed them at an intersection. I think they were between intersections, if I remember correctly.
So they're looking at things like that.
Does Steve want to make a comment?
I'm
I
fine.
don't know that you really want to hear what I want to say.
Go ahead.
I don't mind listening to you.
Well, I think there's a couple things, and Severin, just to be clear, right? You know, I think we're on the speed bumps, right? That's a road that we don't own, so we cannot make that change. As much as we may like to, we can't. As it relates to taking the road back. Yeah, we'd love to take the road back. Wayne, you brought up a couple of points on it, but I think that that would be an option, along with some easements and some other things to solve part of the issue. I think there's been a lot of reliance on the preliminary plat that has gates on it and call it semi-private roads. You know, the reason that they were semi-private is because they were going to be open to emergency vehicles and other things. It's really hard to have a private road or a semi-private road without a gate. Because from a development perspective, that makes absolutely no logical sense, right? So there's a reason that we use the word, semi-private to allow emergency access, government vehicle access, that kind of thing. The development from our standpoint has been designed, built, and invested in based on the representations that gates would be allowed. So we built that off of the preliminary plat. So that's kind of our position on things. Whether I'm still puzzled, frankly, as to whether the city ordinance exists with where it says there aren't any private roads and there aren't any gates. I don't know that ordinance existed at the point in time when the preliminary plat was signed. This is just me. I don't know if this is a factual thing. I think it may have been silent as to the permission of private roads and gates. But it's made it into Title 11 in the most recent amendment. I just don't know that the city would have, especially with, Jody looking in the back end, allowed for the signing of that preliminary plat, allowing for gates, and then knowing that it was against their ordinance. And, we can bring up the preliminary plat that was signed by a number of different city council members that relate to that. So that's just, that's my point of view. I'm disappointed that we are where we are. I think history, unfortunately, is not our friend for either the city or us, given the fact that Mayor Liardson had passed away, and the city, was in a different state. Well, not like physical state, but a different operational state than it is today, right? So, it's and so I think both sides are are trying to recollect the best thing that they have. But we've got a lot of money in this project and on that reliance. So it's we put a lot of money into Summit Creek Drive, all the way from Woodland Hills Road all the way down. That we'll never recover, frankly. So we think that we've been a good citizen to the city. We've always tried to, do what we said that we were going to do. We just want the city to agree that that's what their agreement was and live according to that. So anyway, that's my point of view on that one. So.
I guess maybe my thought, I'm kind of go with Larry and Wayne in respect that I don't know that I've got a problem with private roads or gates and Summit Creek. It's not a public access road or anything like Summit Creek Drive. But I don't know, as a planning commission, we would go against an ordinance, right? So either one of two things is going to happen. Either whatever current ordinance we're under, we'd have to comply with what we can approve, or improve what's allowed under the ordinance. Just to keep it legal, I guess, and clean. I don't know that I have any opinion on a private road or gate, whether it's there or not. But whatever we do, we've just got to follow whatever ordinance we have. What the city council does, I don't know, it's planning commission. City council, planning commission, that's not my problem.
I think they should be allowed to have gates. I think
On private
we
roads.
should, yes, and I think to keep all of their existing gates, and I think we should change whatever ordinances we need to make it legal. But I think that we shouldn't pull the rug out and from under them.
Well, that's my,
Making them open up the roads or not use the gates that we have.
and that's my point too. I don't know that I have a problem with that, but we should either change the ordinance to whatever current ordinance we're under to make that allowable. So as a planning commission, we're doing something that besides the ordinance.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Hey, Jody, did I see you came back from Hawaii and magically appeared?
Yeah, I did.
With a tan too, it looks like.
Yeah, Jody always looks like she has a tan though. So, Jody, the question that I had as it relates to gates and private roads in Title 11, was that an existing ordinance, and when was it passed?
Steve, let me address that.
Okay.
It was passed when there was a Mountain Villa overlay zone that was approved at the request of Don Meekum. And I think Bucky was part of those discussions as well. It didn't address private roads, but it did address gates. It said gates would be acceptable as an aesthetic feature, and that they, as long as they were welded open.
So, But Wayne, that's in the Mountain Villa overlay zone. Where is the ordinance? We don't need to have this discussion, I guess. The question that I have, and we probably just need to dig into it a little bit, is in Title 11, it's, I can't remember the specific paragraph. It says there are no private roads allowed, right? Or it says that there are no gates.
That's a carryover. That's a
Letter
carryover from,
5-2-C.
Okay,
that's a carryover from our old ordinance. Private roads have never been allowed in the city. That wasn't new with Title 11.
yeah,
That was
so
over.
I guess my question, Wayne, is when was that ordinance passed that said no private roads?
Well, we could look, we'll have to research that, Steve, but it's been at least 15 years or more.
Okay, yeah, that was just my question, Wayne, as to, because I know in the codification, a lot of stuff has changed, right? And some inadvertently. The thing I wanted to make sure of is that as you go through that just didn't get inserted as part of an edit, right? And that actually was a historic ordinance that said that. And then then the question is, okay, if now what, right? And that I think is the real question on the table,
Yeah.
because of the reliance that we've placed on that preliminary plat in conversations with the mayor. So, and the fact that, we've had operational gates on Summit Creek Drive for, 3 years.
Well, and I think our point is, we're not trying to argue that point. It's more of, we just got to make sure whatever we do complies with whatever ordinance we're acting on. Right?
Let me add a little bit too, Steve. When we were adopting title, or where we were looking at the new Title 11, I knew that the city council had approved 2 private roads in Summit Creek. So I drafted into the draft of Title 11 that the city would approve private roads. That was in the draft. As we had issues with the codification and things that we had included that we were planning on, where the changes were made, we were planning on having those part of the codification vote. And when that blew up, then we took a step back. And because those weren't in our old ordinance about private roads, it was decided to remove that from Title 11, to keep Title 11 to some degree the same as our old ordinance. So that, I think, is where some of the confusion has come, just a little bit, in talking about private roads. But our private roads have been in our ordinances for many, 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 many years.
Yeah, and Wayne, thank you for that clarification. I just didn't know if it was a Scribner error, right, going back, and if that's what it was, then that's what it was, right? And I appreciate, you taking it back to what it was. I just didn't know if that's what it was.
Okay.
Do you get my point? Because
I do.
I just think somebody could have drafted and said, no, we just don't have private roads, so just change this paragraph to that. When in reality, the old ordinance could have been, could have had just no comment on it.
Right.
So
I just share that with you by way of background, so you
yeah,
understand.
no, I appreciate that. And, the one thing I will say, to you new members of the city council, or I guess the planning commission, and then if you want to vote for run for city council, then great, congratulations, you can do that. But I think we've always tried to stay in accordance with what we've been given, right? And I think we've always tried to help the city grow to the extent that we can, and helping with ordinances and everything else. If we are in fact run amok, then we need to deal with that. But this, unfortunately, is going to be one of those issues that I think we're going to have to address, sooner rather than later. partly so that I think the city and us can get clarity on what we're trying to do with the project, right? And it's been a long time coming, maybe too long, but I think what we're trying to do is build a portion of the city that both the residents and of Summit Creek and the non-residents of Summit Creek, all part of Woodland Hills, can be proud of, right? And that it increases the value and the aesthetics and the livability of Woodland Hills and brings to it, a greater community spirit than what existed before. That's the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And we just hope that it continues to go that way.
I don't disagree. When the gates used to close, they haven't for a while now, even I think.
No, they left them open.
Left them open, but when they used to close and all that, we drive that road there a lot, and because we're just right there off of Summit Creek. I know Bucky really well. And I never had a problem going through the gates when they were open or closed as a resident. Now, being an emergency responder, that was always a little, that was the only concern I had with gates sometimes, because you're waiting a few extra seconds. And that can mean life or death for some people. So as a resident, I've never had problems going through, and we actually, both me and my wife, almost didn't like them a little bit when they closed, because we get a lot of people that come around up Summit Creek Drive, a lot of teenagers that come around and down Eagle Nest, and we just get teenagers constantly all weekend. Those gates seem to they drive up and close gates, sometimes they would turn around. So we never did mind that, and I don't have a problem with private road gate in the community itself, as a resident. But kind of back to the point is, I think whatever we do, we just gotta make sure we're gelling. Like our ordinance is implies is what we're approving, or vice versa, so that we're not doing things against what is allowable under ordinance.
Yeah.
Steve, I think, the planning commission is limited, obviously, in what we can do in that regard. And I think it would behoove you, Summit Creek, to write to the city council and schedule a meeting with them to move forward. I mean, we keep having these meetings and nothing gets resolved out of them, but I think the city council will likely look to you to move it forward.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's something that needs to get resolved sooner rather than later, and get a decision made. And if it's not to your liking, then, what is your next step? If it is to your liking, then that matter is resolved and put to bed.
Yeah, no, and Wayne, I appreciate the counsel and the guidance there. I think, as you well know, we've got Ben down there kind of full-time on the ground, running that stuff. He apologizes. He would have been here at this meeting today and in order to help, but he was flying back from Belize, and apparently you can't land a plane in Texas today. So he's stuck there, and so we're, I'm having to pitch hint, but I think you're right, Wayne. I think what I'm asking Ben to do is get with Jody and make sure that we have a path forward. And if that's bringing a preliminary plat to you, or so that we can then have the, start to schedule a public hearing to address that, so that you can recommend or not recommend a change to the ordinance, then that's where we start. If that starts at the city council, then that's where we start. This is where, I really need your and Jody's navigation, right? To make sure that we're doing what needs to be done so that we can get it accomplished. And you're right. If it doesn't work out, then we'll try to figure out another avenue. So, but I think there's still work to be done, and you're right. We need to press it forward. We want to bring it to closure, because we need to start working on other phases of the project because we have a number of homes that are already up on Summit Creek, and you know, people want to move in. They love Woodland Hills, as do we.
Before you go to all the trouble of a preliminary plat with what you're proposing, my view is you'd be better off to write a letter to the mayor or the city council, telling them what you're going to be bringing forth. And this plat will have gates and private roads on it. And you know that is an unresolved matter at this point in time. And understand that the ordinance needs to be changed in order to accommodate that. And what should happen is the city council then will refer that to us to have a public hearing on the ordinance change. And we would then make a recommendation back to the city council. They may, probably a land use thing, so I guess they will need to have a public hearing as well for input to decide what they want to do with the recommendation that they get from the planning commission. So I think rather than go to all the time and effort of drawing up the plat, to do this first and try to move that through the system, maybe, you know, same time work on the plat, but the plat's going to sit for a while the city goes through these processes, which it has to go through. So that's the only reason I'm suggesting that if you're ready to go with a plat right now, that's one thing, but there may be, you could maybe go forward with this letter in the meantime while you're still working on the plat to get the matter, try to get it resolved.
Okay, and Wayne, that's fair. I appreciate the counsel and guidance on that. So.
Okay, and the main reason I'm bringing it up here tonight, the planning commission, we've got 2 new members, so just wanted to go into some background and everything, so everybody kind of has an understanding of some of the issues involved.
Yeah. Well, and Wayne, you did a good job explaining the history, so we appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Appreciate your input. Next item is number 6, review development and construction standards. I sent everybody the last copy that we have of that. Our little project that we have is to identify the areas in there that pertain to subdivision or that pertain to individual lot owners after when they buy a lot, or it pertains to both. It was designed originally for subdivision, but it's hard to keep exclusive to subdivision issues because some of them have commonality with the lot owner. So what I've done with mine, I took 2 highlighters and I just put out to the side whether it was a subdivision or whether it was an individual lot owner. And some places they're both marked. So to me, it says it pertained to both subdivision and the individual lot owner. And I did that with the main sections, although there's some subsections that are brought out that maybe pertain to both, where the main section doesn't. Just the terminology that it's used. When it talks about an owner, it's hard to me, an owner is a lot owner. It's not a subdivision developer. So I haven't
taken reference to the city as well. You're talking
Yes.
standards. You know, where if it's, for example, because these also would apply to, say, like our water line project. Right? The contractor has to, when putting in a water line for the city, has to
Follow the
comply with the standards. Then the city is the owner.
Good point. And that's right. So some of our residents, maybe myself and others, haven't looked at those clear enough in the past. And so we want to do that and make sure that we identify those and then decide how best to clarify them in our standards.
I would have a suggestion that even as we're clarifying it, ultimately we would, and this is just a thought right now, I'm working with a lot of communities in this way, is we would separate them. Because a lot of times when you have a construction standard set, you're handing that over to a contractor who's either doing a project for a developer or a city. They have certain standards they have to adhere to when working on those projects that that are city standards. Then a lot owner would be something that maybe he would get handed if he's built a lot. Right, so that they're almost two separate standards that would be applicable depending on what they're doing.
But you leave them in the development construction standards, but just divide them accordingly,
I would,
or you put the lot owner back into an ordinance
I would put it either into an ordinance or a separate
section.
section or something like that, and then keep the construction standard. Because, for example, if we go into a city and when you go to most cities and do work, they have construction standards. But that's applicable to a contractor that's doing something that will ultimately be a city facility. That means a road, water line, sewer, whether the developer's putting it in or the city's putting it in, it's something that ultimately be a city facility. That's what the construction standards apply to. Most cities will have ordinances that pertain to individual lot owners that they have to adhere to. It's a little bit different standard than an ordinance. So I would almost say we separate it so that when contractors work with the city, he's completely clear on what construction standards he's got to adhere to. Which would be, for example, APWA, which I know that paragraph has been added in there. That is a construction standard for contractors that are doing city or municipal
Or subdivision.
or subdivision work or something like that.
One of our concerns has been if we segregate them out, then we got basically two. If we change one, we potentially run the risk of overlooking the other if they're the same criteria. An example of this is hillside development, which is the very last portion. It used to be in the subdivision ordinance, and we removed it and put it into the development and construction standards. Although it does reference an owner, which implies a lot owner. And those standards are incumbent upon the lot owner as well as the developer for the subdivision. So that's the bit of dilemma that we have in trying to work through these where the standard is the same. For example, with, again, using hillside development, where it talks about slope and what a certain type of slope, you have to leave it in place. That doesn't mean that the lot owner can now come along and wipe that slope out. He's bound by that same criteria as the subdivision developer was.
Right.
And how they're going to treat that slope on the lot.
And so in that case, instead of seeing where cities will actually have development standards versus construction standards.
And that's what we had development and construction standards. We had subdivision ordinances, then we had city code, and then we had zoning ordinances. None of all this was codified since 2008.
Yeah, so and this is just me trying what I've seen with other communities that we work in, because we've lots of cities in the state. They'll have development standards that apply to the developer when he's doing development, like slopes.
When you say developer, you're talking about a subdivision developer?
Talk about subdivision developers. So
Okay.
if it's a Summer Creek that comes in, they have a development standard. Here's your slopes. They have hillside ordinances, stuff like that they have to apply to. Then they have their construction standards, which are something that you have a contractor and you say, this is your specifications that you have to comply with when you're building something that's ultimately going to be a city facility. Now, a lot's not going to be ultimately a city facility, so that would fall under the development standard. Whereas construction standard is something the city's ultimately going to take over, that they want the contractor to adhere to. So that's, and then you've got your actual homeowner ordinances that they have to, which are usually the IBC or whatever, stuff like that. Following that, I just bring it up because I know there was some discussion going around. This was a number of months ago. It was some postings going on the site where there was, I could see some lively confusion on what Corbett's responsibilities were under the construction standards, and they were misinterpreting what his responsibility was to the individual guy building his house versus a contractor that's doing the city project. And that misinterpretation got pretty heated.
Were those items in our development?
They were in our construction standards, and it was in these construction standards right here. It talked about the responsibility that the public works
Mhm.
director has to inspect a certain thing. This homeowner applied it to him, that should have inspected on his house, which we didn't apply to a public works director.
The contractor is the one, is that what you're saying? The contractor is the one who's responsible for making sure that whatever that was is done properly.
Yeah, it came down to like compaction of that.
Okay,
Well, he was interpreting it because he was reading construction standards that the public works director should be passing that on. When in fact, it's the home builder who should be, the home builder's contractor.
yes.
Is that. But those are some, so that's where I say sometimes you've got to separate that, so it's pretty clear where the responsibility lies, because then it comes back to the city, and if there's misinterpretation, that's what that was.
So that's the kind of thing we want to avoid.
Yeah.
So however, whatever we decide to separate those or identify those some way so that it's made clear where that line is between, the contractor doing the work or.
Even if it's the same standards, just separate it out. Here's construction standards, here's development standards, so that someone's not reading the construction standard and applying that to their individual house. Because the public works director doesn't inspect compaction on the.
So would you say construction standards for X, then construction standards for the construction of a residence? And then how would you break that out?
So generally, the city would have development standards. They don't necessarily have construction standards for individual lot owner. That usually applies under the IBC.
IRC code.
Or IRC or whatever, would apply to the individual homeowner. The development standards applies to what the developer does in the development, that may not necessarily be a future city responsibility, like a hillside slope or something like that, because they're not going to be maintaining that stuff as the homeowner. Then the construction standard applies to whatever the city is ultimately going to be taking over.
City
Water,
facility.
sewer, roads and all that kind of stuff. It's generally how we've kind of seen these broken out, so it's pretty clear. who's
So maybe a
responsible
simple
for what.
definition at the beginning of each title that says this construction standard applies to this.
And I don't know what the best solution is, but I think we need to break that out clearly so that someone's not confusing, because he read the standard right. It said the public works director should be, approving compaction. But
In the
it was
wrong
applying-
scenario.
it was Applying it to his footing and not the fact that it was for like a water line or a road or something like that, which is what it was intended for. But they didn't read that. So he was saying, hey, why did he pass my house off without checking my compaction? If my house sells, now it's the city's fault.
So it was in the wrong scenario.
It was in the right, so he read it right. It was just, he applied it wrong because the application wasn't clear.
Is there an issue here too?
Not even remember the name.
When we know that if it deals with land use, we have to have public hearings.
Yes.
Isn't part of what we were doing with the construction standards are not land use issues? Or are they land use issues?
That's a question I still have. I don't know. Jody, do you know the answer to that?
Depends where it's applied, I think.
I mean, for example, if it's a hillside development issue on slope and grading, that could be a land use.
But that would have been addressed
It should be
during,
a development standard, not a construction
yeah, and that would be addressed during the development and construction stage when we approved the preliminary plat.
But that would be something that we would need to if we're gonna modify that,
If you're gonna modify
We need a
hillside
public hearing.
development and the development and construction standards for a subdivision, you would need a public hearing.
But in terms of, I mean, as I read these construction standards, and I haven't gone down one by one and said this one applies here, this one applies here. But most of the stuff in there, it seems, really is for the developer of the subdivision.
yes.
Mhm.
That's right.
But there are bits and pieces that are scattered throughout it that really relate to whoever's building a house on that lot.
And that's what we need to identify
And
and segregate them some way.
But Ted say, we ought to pull those out and make them a separate ordinance.
I don't even know how to.
The separate,
Title,
separate section in the book.
Either, if
Or
you're
one.
gonna call them development and construction standards, you need to separate, here's your development standards, here's your construction standards. Or you just separate them, call one of them development standards, one of them construction standards. One of them applies to the developer, one of them applies to a contractor, doing the improvements. The city should never have a homeowner construction standard, at least in my opinion. That falls under the IRC, the agency, and the homeowner.
But what about when we talk about driveways? So driveways,
That should be really important.
it is an ordinance, but we put it in, that's one of those things where the radius and the slope and everything is inspected during the building thing. And so currently, though, that is in our development and construction standards.
Is it a city ordinance?
We quasi,
Yeah.
We look at it as something that has to be followed.
We look at it as it being adopted by the city council
So
in the development and construction standards, but it doesn't.
it's not an ordinance per se.
It's a mess.
Now we're confused with more questions.
Yes.
Well, that's why we're having this discussion.
And I'd be happy to go through.
Yeah, if you would, please, and maybe as we look at them, it'll fall into place, will be an easy way
Yeah, and I have.
to segregate, to identify.
The other suggestions that we put into this, at least talking specific to construction standards, which ones apply or govern? If there's a question between two different standards, which one's going to govern? So the city is, adopted EPWA a year ago, plus we have our own standards. If say, for example, and I'll just throw out one that work with water line standards. If EPWA says something different than our standard, which one's going to cover? We should identify that too, just in standards, that city standards apply. City has adopted EPWA and city standards, both apply to construction, but city standards cover if there is a question. We do that quite a bit when we write it up.
Is that not in there, in the verbiage?
I read it real quick, but so I don't know, I didn't see. I didn't notice
Let me
it.
look quick, it's right here.
And then I probably have to mark up or just read some of these standards because they don't feel in ours or a little bit outdated. Some of the things I saw there don't really.
Let's see, city adopts the American Public Works Association standards for infrastructure development to include roadways, storm drainage, water systems, sewer systems, underground electrical, landscaping, traffic control, along with any existing or future amendments that are made to it. Okay, it doesn't say that, so it probably should. However,
And a lot of
should
states,
there be any, wording, I mean, should there be any
there's a
differences?
There's a conflict between the two
City,
city standards.
And the very first paragraph, it says, these standards provide general requirements for improvements to be built by the developer, subdivider, owner, or contractor for all types of construction. So that very first paragraph, the way it's written right now, seems that the whole thing applies to all those different groups, which we really don't want it to be. Or it's like,
That's my
Yeah,
perception.
I agree. And that's where the confusion comes.
I think what Wayne's taken on here is great. Great thing for the city, would be very important for the city to do is that idea of just kind of separating it out.
Well, I think that the example for the game can is a perfect reason why we need to do it. So we don't have that kind of confusion coming out of a homeowner. That says, hey, Cindy, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Well, yes, we did. But what you're reading from is what the developer should have done, not the city.
Your home in this case, it should be his home contract. His house.
Yeah.
So and we're all on the same page with that. Let's continue to look at that, review it, and we'll talk about it in the future. We'll maybe bring it up in March and see where things are at. What we do in March. Just so that it heads up a little bit, probably in March, there's the Northview Circle subdivision. Well, it's actually the Mountain Oaks Estate subdivision, which is down at Northview Circle, where they made those road improvements. It's back behind Glenn Anderson's home, where the city kind of dropped the ball years ago and gave up the bond. The city had to go in and do some redoing of that because it fell off and they had to redo it. So the owner of that subdivision there is preparing an amendment to the plat for some of the lots, not all of them, but some of them. That's being worked on by LEI right now, doing their technical review of it. So we'll probably see.
Weren't there originally two votes? In that?
Yes, but I think only one is being amended. One cul-de-sac. They're both on cul-de-sacs.
Oh, Maple Ravine and
Yeah,
Northview Circle.
yeah. So just to kind of give you a heads up to that. Also, Jeremy Broadbank has requested combining two lots. And so he's prepared engineers prepared a preliminary plat for that, and LEI is looking at that as well. We treat it, because our ordinance says, so we treat it as a subdivision, that it's not a subdivision. We follow the same process that we do. If somebody wants to combine a lot. Yeah, it really is. But we follow the same
It's a
process.
multiplication process.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a concern about that. Because it appears to me, and I may be wrong, that the county has been approving combining lots. Because if you look at the Utah County parcel map, for instance, up here where the Petersons built their new house, there are 3 lots. And on the Utah County parcel map now, it is 1 lot. And that lot, that never came to us for the Petersons to combine those 3 lots into one. But it appears that the county has done it.
You talking about the Petersons that just moved in?
Yeah.
November?
The big house on Eagle Nest,
It's right next to,
right across from Cox's and from Litt's, next to,
John Peterson's.
Old house.
yeah,
well, I'm thinking of a different one.
yeah.
Okay, but that's, maybe if they bought 3 lots.
Peterson, oh, I know what you're talking about.
Okay,
He
that's-
combined those.
On the Utah County parcel
No, but I-
map, they are
I think-
combined into 1 lot.
I think we reviewed and approved that. No?
Not, but I
Remember, Jody?
Yeah, we approved that a while ago. John Peterson. In fact, he's got a third one that he wants to combine there as well. And put all 3 of them together. He has 2 meters at the home. That was Oh, we did a long time ago.
Not in planning commission.
Uh-huh. No, they can't. And it would have had a,
You were asleep that meeting.
Well, also before you were here, so I can't blame you.
Well, you can. Yeah.
let me look.
The county won't do anything without city.
Well, that's what I thought,
Yeah.
but I don't remember that at all. One of the reasons I say that is because when I started working on my lot seat project, there were 3 separate lots, all owned by the Sweetport LLC, 25 Tejas out of Texas. And now, it's separate.
So the city council looked at it on January 22nd. It's lot 66 and 67. It might have just been identified in on agendas that way, on lot 6 as lot 66 and 67. So if I go back,
But the planning commission.
I gotta go
the city
back.
Council did it without our,
And no, it said the planning commission has approved the proposal to combine lot 66 and 67. So that would have happened in 2018 then.
2018,
Uh-huh.
maybe that's why I don't remember. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, so it would have been done in 2018.
Well, it took the county a long time to change it.
Well, it was
It
a,
was 2020 when they have it separate.
yeah, so there was,
Sometimes it takes, I don't remember when that last night. Sometimes those things get approved and the person's supposed to do a Mylar that then comes for signatures. And sometimes we've had those sometimes late as 6 months or whatever after the approval has been done before the city sees the Mylar. And that's what the county operates.
Well, that could be the reason. But, you know, as I said, it was a relatively short period of time where it was several lots and now it's not. And it was a long time after 2018.
it's taking the county on average 8 or 9 months to get something recorded lately. I've had people who've called and said, we've sold a lot, we shouldn't be charged a standby fee. And I'll say, so when did you sell the lot? Oh, May of last year. Can you send me the documentation? And they do. And sure enough, it just hasn't.
I noticed that like the Shantos that bought the Christensen slot running ahead of Woodland Hills Drive,
Mhm.
it still shows Christensen. on
Yes.
it, on the lot.
I know Carbon County is about 6 months backlog with reporting down there. So.
Now, refresh my memory, if we do combine lots, what happens to the water situation as far as meters and, because then instead of paying 2 different fees to support our water system, they only end up paying 1, is that correct?
Right, the assumption is they're only using water on 1 lot, or the 2 lots are supporting 1 house. But the city does not return water shares
Right.
to them.
Okay.
So,
Recently, the ones that have been combined have requested 2 meters as well. So they are paying 2. So the last one that will be coming to the planning commission next month, they have 2 meters installed and they are paying for 2 meter fees.
that's Jeremy.
That's Jeremy. John Peterson has 2 meters installed and he's paying 2 fees.
What's the purpose of that, other than all 2 years? Just to be able to use one line?
No, Wits have 2 meters. Actually, I think they might have 3 meters. I think they might have. I was just gonna correct that. And the one in Summit Creek that combined lots, they have 2 meters too. I don't Know why they do it, but if they request it,
Well,
we're not gonna turn it down.
I mean, one of the reasons to slow down the summer is because now they only have one HOA fee
Yeah,
when we provide the lots.
Yeah.
So then you have to pay 2 HOA fees.
Well, the taxes
That
will go
will
down
come to
too,
us.
the property taxes, because no longer is it a buildable lot, now it's just
Yeah.
property.
Oh.
So that's why some of them combine it. Avoid that.
I noticed we are on number, still on number 6, right, talking about subdivisions.
Yeah, well,
You,
We can be.
you made a note of the Nelson subdivision HOA information.
Yes.
Looking at allowing wood shake shingles, which is against Woodland Hills building code, correct?
correct.
Right.
Now, an HOA cannot be less restrictive. Is that true? They
Not
would be
supposed to
more
be.
restrictive.
They can be less restrictive, but it doesn't apply.
Okay.
The city does not consider that. We don't enforce the less
Wouldn't we then
restrictive.
want to recommend that because of the city code that they would not have that in their
Yes.
HOA?
And I don't, have you done that yet, Jody? Have you sent an email to Robert to tell him to ask him to remove that shake shingle?
I've asked them in future ones to remove it. So in Plat C and Plat D that you will have coming in shortly, it will be removed from those CCNRs.
And do they also have fencing allowances that are different than city ordinance? Okay.
Robert's working on a fencing ordinance down there that would be something that the city might look to adopt for those properties. Because they're markedly different from us
Because
up
they don't
here.
have the trees.
Right.
Shrubs.
So Robert, he said he'd work on drafting an amendment to our ordinance that would work for him down there. So I'm kind of waiting to see what he might.
But he's really looking at the ability to fix the whole backyard, for instance. Whereas under ours, you can't do that.
Sure.
You have a, you can't do it all the way around.
But there it seems to make sense
It does.
for privacy, but we don't need that when we're private development for education. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay, good. In fact, his, Plat Phase C. It's, I think LEI has it under review now, I'm looking at it. So forth, so March might be able to do some.
So he's built, is building 3 has built, or is building 3 homes right now?
Future under construction. Okay.
So is he down by the new church?
Mhm.
Okay,
Those new homes are going up where it is.
okay. So yeah, I have a question on one of the things he says that when he was talking about the water runoff. It says channel for runoff for large rainstorms are required to drain water from lot to lot in an open area, retention areas or into the road. So into the road, that's okay?
It's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
That's after construction and that's.
Oh,
what
as
the-
out,
Yeah,
okay, so that's not the SW.
It's not the SWIP.
Okay. Okay. Then also he says that you have to have no less than 40% grass in your landscape area. Is that because they're just in the fields kind of and not in the woods?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some water right there, I think, Jason, we can get down there. Over in Salem.
Okay, oh, and then also he's talking about animals. No animals, livestock of any kind. Is that just his subdivision?
Yes.
So up here we can.
and see, that's correct. He's being more
More
restrictive
restricted.
in his
Okay.
CCNRs. And that's. he can do that.
Okay.
Well, and actually ours wouldn't allow it unless it was over an acre anyway.
If it was what?
If it's not over, the initial first acre can have so many, and that's part of the reason too.
But we don't enforce that unless somebody complains.
Does he get a complaint?
1 horse, 1 cow, 1 goat, 2 dogs, 2 cats.
So Jody, can we raise pigs?
No, you may
I'm
not.
just kidding, just kidding.
And
we
no
were-
roosters.
Well, I just thought we were raising enough turkeys.
There is one I hear every morning when I walk.
Okay.
Rooster.
Oh, Rooster,
Oh,
yeah.
well, you're welcome to take care of that one.
You have to steal it.
I just hear it, I don't know where it's at.
Somebody said somebody trained a turkey to call it a rooster. Very well. Anything else? Any questions or concerns?
I don't know, I was thinking about that, maybe it was kind of development and construction. Part of the reason we said there was because like most of these development standards are what the developer gets with his engineer to. Streets have to be this wide, your slopes have to be this, they can do in their design. Construction standards are specific to the contractor, that says your pipe has to be this specification, pressure testing follows this. It's kind of why you want to separate them, because they go kind of two different applications.
Makes sense.
Okay, makes sense. Okay. Well, Steve, you've hung with us there tonight. You, it's like you might be the last one standing.
Well, I'm trying to help where I can.
We appreciate you. Thanks for all you do.
So, and then, I guess I would encourage anybody that has questions about, what we're doing with the development, reach out to me. Jody's got, my contact information. Wayne does. Yeah. Ted does. So,
Yeah, I want to find out what you're planning to do with Eagle Nest.
with what?
I'll send you that.
With Eagle Nest,
It doesn't end, it goes way down along the ridge and comes back.
not the road, the actual plat and development. That shows us.
Yeah. Ted, give me a call. I'll walk you through it. Either that or I can have Eric do it. That's probably a better thing, but,
Why do I know that?
glad to talk to you about it.
Am I in for an HOA fee? That's what I'm wondering.
You're what?
I got an HOA fee coming my way.
You're 1,000 oaks.
Not yet. Not yet.
Technically, you're 1,000 oaks, not
Yeah, if
so.
you see the updated.
Yeah.
Only if you want it, Ted. Only if you want it.
You have a
Well,
swimming
I want the
pool.
amenities, I just don't want to pay the fee.
You have a swimming pool that you pay your HOA.
Well, I want that out. Can we get grandfather into the amenities, but not the cost?
Steve, there has been a question. What's your HOA fee over there now monthly?
I think it's, don't quote me on this, but I think it's $375 a quarter.
That'd be- that's about $100 a month.
$125 a month.
I think so. Yeah, something like that. But then again, I haven't looked at, we passed that and people pay it and I really don't worry about it. So other than trying to make sure we got enough reserves.
We get asked that a lot. So. We're good. Take a motion to adjourn.
I move the way adjourned.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Very well.
Second.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you guys for your support. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Steve. Thank you.
Hey, how much snow do you guys have up there? I didn't get up there today.